Not long ago, Carmella Wallace was a working single mother in Homewood, Illinois, raising two boys largely on her own in a quiet Chicago suburb. Today she wakes up every morning in a $6.9 million, 17,000 square foot compound in Burr Ridge, one of the most exclusive residential pockets in the entire Chicago metro area. She oversees a music catalog tied to a deal reported at over $200 million. She runs a nonprofit that is actively saving lives right now. She opened a business in the neighborhood where she raised her family, and she does all of it while carrying a grief that most people would not be able to survive. None of this was something she signed up for. Every single piece of it exists because of one night in December 2019 that changed everything forever. Carmella grew up in the Chicago area, spending her early years in Calumet Park on the south side before relocating to Homewood, a working-class south suburb about 20 miles outside the city. After separating from the boy's father in the early 2000s, she became the primary parent for both of her sons, Gerard, who the world would eventually know as Juice WRLD, and his older brother Brian. Their father later passed away in June of 2019, just months before Gerard himself would die. But for most of their childhood, it was Carmella holding everything together. She worked, managed the household, pushed education hard, and supported Gerard's growing obsession with music, even when it looked like nothing more than a teenager's hobby. He attended Homewood Flossmoor Community High School, where teachers later described him as brilliant, creative, and capable of freestyling effortlessly in the hallways between classes. During high school, he also went through counseling, and Carmella has said those sessions gave him the language to express his inner emotional world. He learned how to name what he was feeling. Later, he took that skill into the recording booth and poured it into music that connected with an entire generation of young people who were experiencing the same things but had no words for any of it. What Carmella did not fully see during those years was how deep her son's dependence on prescription painkillers and lean had already grown. That gap between what a mother sees and what a child hides is one of the most painful parts of this whole story. Gerard started releasing music in 2015 under the name Juice the Kid, uploading tracks to SoundCloud and building a following through a style that genuinely felt like nothing else. He was blending emo rock sensibility with hip-hop structure, rapping and singing simultaneously, writing hooks with an instinct that most professional songwriters spend years trying to develop. His lyrics were confessional in a way that mainstream rap rarely allowed. Anxiety, heartbreak, addiction, and the fear of dying young, delivered with enough rawness that millions of kids felt personally addressed. In 2017, he signed to Lil Bibby's Grade A Productions out of Chicago, which became a joint venture with Interscope Records in early 2018, reportedly worth $3 million. That number was staggering for a kid who had built his entire buzz on a free platform. Within months, Lucid Dreams was sitting at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and would eventually go diamond certified. His debut album, Goodbye and Good Riddance, went triple platinum. In March 2019, Death Race for Love debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. He won Best New Artist at the Billboard Music Awards. Behind the scenes, he was recording 3 to 5 songs every single night, and his vault reportedly grew to contain over 2,000 unreleased tracks. Then December 8, 2019 arrived, 6 days after his 21st birthday. Gerard was aboard a private Gulfstream jet flying from Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles back to Chicago when federal law enforcement agents were notified mid-flight about suspected weapons and narcotics on the plane. Officers were waiting at Midway International Airport when the jet landed after 1:30 in the morning. They found 70 pounds of marijuana, 6 prescription bottles of suspected liquid codeine, and 3 firearms. Members of his team reported that Gerard had taken several unknown pills during the flight. He was then seen seizing while walking through the private hangar, bleeding from the mouth. A Homeland Security officer administered 2 doses of Narcan. He briefly regained consciousness but was incoherent. He was transported to Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn and pronounced dead at 3:14 in the morning. On January 22, 2020, the Cook County Medical Examiner confirmed the cause of death as oxycodone and codeine toxicity. Manner of death, accidental. He was 21 years old. The music world went silent. Tributes came from artists worldwide. Thousands of fans gathered at Millennium Park in Chicago for a public memorial they organized themselves, not because anyone told them to, but because they needed somewhere to go with the grief. And in the middle of the most devastating moment of her life, Carmella Wallace became responsible for one of the most powerful posthumous music estates ever assembled in hip-hop history. There was no handbook. One day, she was the mother of a superstar navigating the industry alongside her son. The next, she was fielding calls from record labels, attorneys, and publishing companies while planning a funeral. What she inherited was genuinely staggering. By early 2023, Juice WRLD had surpassed 30 billion total streams on Spotify alone, placing him among the most streamed artists in the platform's entire history. His monthly listener count has consistently sat between 29 and 31 million, numbers most actively promoting living artists cannot maintain. His posthumous album Legends Never Die debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 in 2020. Fighting Demons followed at #2 in 2021. In early 2022, Opus Music Group acquired 90% of his master recording income and 90% of his publishing in a deal confirmed by Billboard at a 9-figure sum, with multiple industry sources reporting figures as high as $200 million. Annual royalties from publishing and artist income alone were estimated at a minimum of $9 million at the time of that transaction. That is a floor, not a ceiling. The physical expression of that wealth is in Burr Ridge, Illinois. In 2022, Carmella purchased a property on Lee Court, a private cul-de-sac in one of the Chicago Metro's most exclusive residential communities, for $6.9 million. The main house spans 17,100 square feet, built in 2016, with 6 bedrooms, 6.5 bathrooms, and the kind of finishes that show up in architecture magazines. She then bought the adjacent vacant parcel for $1.4 million, giving her complete control over the surrounding land and total privacy on all sides. The combined $8.3 million transaction shattered the all-time residential sale record for Burr Ridge, blowing past the previous record of $2.1 million set in 2007 by more than $6 million. Former professional athletes are her neighbors. The annual property tax bill on the home runs $75,000 per year. But the mansion is only one layer of how she actually operates. In spring 2020, just months after losing Gerard, Carmella launched Live Free 999, a nonprofit built specifically to support young people struggling with anxiety, depression, and addiction. She was receiving an outpouring of messages from fans explaining how Juice WRLD's music had pulled them through their darkest moments, and she saw both a responsibility and an opportunity to keep that mission alive in a concrete way. Live Free 999 partners with Crisis Text Line to provide confidential support through text messages, reaching teenagers in a way traditional hotlines often cannot. It awards grants to organizations with proven mental health approaches. Carmella also serves on the board of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and speaks publicly at events across the country. She has said that helping others is part of her own healing, that by serving people who struggled the way Gerard struggled, she stays connected to his purpose. In October 2024, she opened Homewood Brewing Company at 8225 Dixie Highway, right in the community where she raised Gerard. Her son Brian heads brewing operations. Their signature beer, Wishing Whale, donates 10% of net proceeds directly to Live Free 999. She brought her roots and her mission together in the same building. Managing this estate is not without complexity. Every posthumous release decision is scrutinized by millions of fiercely protective fans online. In 2023, when Juice WRLD's name was quietly removed from the cover art of a posthumous collaboration with the Kid Laroi, fans erupted. Laroi himself publicly stated he had nothing to do with the decision, which illustrated just how many parties are involved in every call and how amplified each one gets at global scale. Carmella has been direct about the tension she carries, that Gerard recorded every day because it was what he loved most, and that releasing his music is the most meaningful way to honor his commitment to his fans, but that protecting his artistic integrity is something she will never compromise on. That balance, negotiated daily without a playbook, while simultaneously running a nonprofit, managing a community business, approving licensing deals, and sitting on suicide prevention boards, is what the real story looks like. Carmella Wallace went from working single mother in Homewood, Illinois, to the executive of one of the highest-value rap catalogs in the streaming era, not because she planned it, but because she refused to let what her son built disappear after he did. The mansion is real, the numbers are real, and so is every decision she makes every single day to carry this forward. What do you think about what Carmella Wallace has built since 2019? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more stories like this one.